So what's up, everybody? This is Gus from Gus Villa Jewelry. Welcome to the Let's Talk Bling podcast. I started this podcast because I wanted to kind of peel back the curtain on the day and like everyday operations of a jeweler, of a person who owns a jewelry business, who doesn't necessarily, like all things considered, doesn't necessarily know what they're doing all the time, you know? And I wanted to create this sort of platform to not only talk to people that I would find interesting, but to also, let people know kind of what I'm all about in the sense of like my everyday life. And, because a lot of times I think that I hear or what's perceived on YouTube and what's perceived on Instagram and Facebook is just the highlight reel, right? And this is kind of what I always talk about. Like, these are times where people, have this sort of admiration for other people that they see on Instagram that are really, really big, but they only really see the popular sides of them, the good times, so to speak. And so I do this podcast so that I could show you kind of like what really goes on. So this particular podcast in particular, even though I said that twice in a row, is episode 2. And it's something that I really talked about or really struggled with, whether I really wanted to do it or not, because I usually, like many others, kind of just show the highlight reel. And, I thought to myself, bro, like if you really want to do this podcast and you really want to bring people in, you kind of have to tell your story and how you started and the real struggles behind your whole journey. So this podcast is going to be my story, right? It's going to be how I started this thing, how I got to the point where I'm at now, and I'm obviously nowhere near where I want to be, but I wanted to tell everybody exactly what I went through. And it's not to a pity story, or it's not kind of like this, how do I explain it? Like this showing off or boasting about where I'm at, because like I said, I'm not where I want to be, but it's more of just kind of telling people where I came from. Maybe this touches someone else that's kind of was in my situation a couple of years ago. Someone that's gone through struggles, someone that's gone through a fuckload of struggles, I won't lie to you. And someone that's gone through a lot of ups and downs. And maybe there's someone sitting out there in a car, or that's sitting out there in kind of a similar situation I was, and says, you know what, man, like this, if a guy like this can do it, so can I. And maybe my story will reach out to someone and say, you know what, maybe it gives them that extra nudge that they need to maybe start a project that is eventually going to get them into financial freedom. Maybe it's going to get them out of a situation that they don't necessarily like with a 9-to-5 job. Maybe it's going to get them out of a situation right now where they, have all these dreams and they see someone already at the end of the road, and they don't really know how to connect the dots between quitting their job and actually doing it. They just see someone out there, with a brand that already exists, and they say, man, I wish I can get there, but I don't really know how to do it. And so I want to tell my story because I want to let people know that you can do it. You know what I mean? And that I was exactly in the same shoes as a lot of people. And I ate a lot of shit to get to where I'm at. But ultimately, the message is of positivity. So I'm going to have a couple sips of my drink real quick, and then we'll get this party started. Let's do this.
Gus Villa Jewelry.
Gus Villa Jewelry. All right, so what's up, guys? Once again, this is Gus from Gus Villa Jewelry. I'll start this podcast off, like I said, I'm going to be telling my story. Hopefully it's entertaining to you guys. It is going to be quite rambly, but I feel like as much details as I could possibly give you, that's kind of what I want to do, because I want to be as transparent as possible. So ultimately, without sounding too weird about it, my name actually isn't Gus Villa. That's an abbreviation for my full name. My name is Gustavo Villalobos. So I just grabbed the Gus and the Villa just to make things easier because I know a lot of people can't really pronounce my name. And so I am the son of immigrant parents that migrated to this country. My father is a full-blooded Colombian man, and my mother is Argentinian. Shout out to the World Cup winners of 2022. It's been a long journey for us to get here. So I just wanted to pause and shout out my mother, who's an Argentinian woman, and we are World Cup champions. So. But yeah, they migrated to this country many years ago in the 80s. And just like any other parents that came to this country struggling, trying to live the American dream, my parents met at a house party. There wasn't Tinder, there wasn't Plenty of Fish or all these apps that are coming out now. They met the old-fashioned way. My dad went up to my mom and was like, hey, can I buy you a drink at this, not buy you a drink, but like, let me get you a drink at a house party. And that's how they met. And they had me and my brother. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and we grew up here in Miami. We're Miami boys through and through, my brother and my sister and I had a pretty average lifestyle growing up. I wasn't necessarily had all the things that I wanted, but I had a nice stable house. I grew up with my mom and my dad married. They've been married 40 plus years. And so I grew up kind of an average kid. I didn't have, like I said, all the financial things that I necessarily wanted, but there was always kind of food on the table. So it wasn't something that I remember being very, very poor or anything like that. But I did grow up with my struggles, right? So I grew up here in Miami, like I said. And my mom always tells me kind of the same thing, that I always had this interest for selling. I can tell you for sure one of my biggest passions is actually selling things. And you'll later on find out how this ultimately incorporates into the lifestyle that I have now. Pretty pedestrian type of life till growing up. And around the time that I got to 18 or 19 is really where this story begins, because I got a job. I remember the ad when I applied to it said it was a sports marketing job. And so when I remember talking to one of my best friends, shout out to Mike out there, and I remember telling him we both applied for the same job, and he told me basically like, hey man, I found this job on, I think it was like Indeed or something crazy like that. I don't even think Indeed worked at the time. I think it may have been like Craigslist. Shout out to Craigslist for all the old heads who have no idea what even Craigslist is. It's this shady website that existed back in the day that got shut down because of like illicit sex ads, by the way. So it's kind of weird, but they used to do job postings, and they had like this sports marketing job post. So I thought I was going to be like, the next, I don't know, sports agent. And that's what I thought it was going to be like. And when I end up showing up, it ends up being this cold calling job. And I don't notice that it's this cold calling job until I start actually working it. So the first day. So the interview process goes, they don't tell you anything. You just sit down and they tell you, oh yeah, like we do sports marketing and we do all the marketing, face-to-face marketing for all these big time clients. And yes, they did have some big time clients like the Florida Panthers, but they don't exactly tell you what you're doing. And then they tell you, oh yeah, come back tomorrow. You got the second interview. Just come back tomorrow. We'll see how you work out. So, of course, I show up the next day and I jump into this lady's car and we go out to like this place in like North Broward. And the place, I mean, right from the get, you realize very quickly that this is a, cold calling job or what they call business to business marketing. But really what it was is this lady had a pamphlet of Florida Panther tickets, which are these hockey tickets. And she, without me knowing, she's like, hey, how you doing? She kind of gets to know me in this car. She swings open the door to her car, walks out, and she's like, okay, well, just follow me. And I'm like, all right, that's kind of shady. You know what I'm saying? So we go into like this corporate park in the middle of like North Broward. If you guys are familiar with this area, this is like, basically the Boca area. That it's just nothing but like corporate parks and offices or whatever. And we step out of the car and we just swing open this door. And I think this lady has an appointment with somebody behind the counter. And she just starts talking, rattling off her sales pitch to get these guys to buy Panther tickets. Really, that's what it was. I mean, it was pretty crazy the way it started, you know? And I was like, what the flying shit have I gotten myself into? You know, I'm here thinking that this is going to be, I'm going to be a sports marketer. And I'm like talking to these random receptionists, which are all kicking us out of the offices, you know? And so like, I realized very quickly that what I am doing is straight up like B2B, like cold calling. I'm just walking in, I'm soliciting 1,000%. These people's businesses. I have no appointment. I'm walking in there with this lady and I am learning, like she is just pitching in 30 seconds before they kick her out, maybe projecting her voice loud enough to where someone is going to find interest in these Panther tickets. Now, if you're from South Florida or you've been, you grew up, south of Orlando, you realize that, yeah, they're the Florida Panthers, but we have no hockey culture down here, right? Like it's all about the Heat. It's all about the Dolphins, it's all about the Canes, right? Like we don't give a flying rat's ass about the Panthers. And more so hockey, right? So number one, we're a fickle fan base at best. And now you're going to tell us to go see hockey where it's like 80 degrees all year round. This is a tough sell, my guy, right? This is tough at best, right? That's me putting it lightly. So needless to say, the first couple of hours, we're just getting absolutely ransacked, kicked out of these places. But some way, somehow, and this is, I guess, what tips the scale into the positive side, this lady who is interviewing me, but really I'm just kind of sticking around and just shadowing her, manages to sell like 6 to 9 pamphlets of these things, man. And some way, somehow, she convinces a random person she just met to pay $30 for 10 tickets. This was the deal. $30 for 10 tickets sitting in the mezzanine level. And I always remember that because it's a pitch that I was just like, what is it? What is a mezzanine level? Number one. But number two, how the hell did you get someone to spend $30 just randomly while you walked in there with a pamphlet of tickets and actually buy this crap, right? I'm like, this? Okay, you got to understand, the people that we're buying this to or selling it to are random people. They're not Panthers fans, right? But what she was able to do was create some sort of emotional connection within 3 to 5 minutes of the conversation. She has no idea who these people were, but creates a level of emotion that triggers into her painting the picture. So what I would see was she would see a random lady and she wouldn't pitch it to that lady the exact same way that she would pitch it to someone else. And so she began to cater to who she was speaking to. And it was the first time I had ever seen a person, number one, do a live sale in front of me, a cold sale, but at the same time, cater this sale to each person that she was with. Mind you, I had like these crappy, I worked at a movie theater before that. I was a bag boy at the Winn-Dixie on 49th Street in Hialeah. If people know who they're talking about, like you'll know exactly what that 49, it's a fresco right now. That shit still exists to this day. You know what I'm saying? So this is the kind of jobs I had. And when I moved on to this job, this was the first time I had to see someone I was able to see someone be not manipulated, I should say, but be sold to. That's really what I want to say. So someone that had no idea what the Panthers even were, but this lady would come in and she would sell them in a way where now, 10 minutes ago, I was thinking about the opera show or the Oprah show. I'm sorry, the Oprah show. And now all of a sudden, I'm thinking about what this lady's telling me about, taking my family to go see a Panthers game, right? So I go from having no experience with sales to just abruptly the most hardcore sale that you can do. Other than, I'm sure there's more hardcore sales out there, but it was, to me, it was something that I was like, oh my God, this is so cool, right? And I know that most people would have probably sent, this company, lady, please just, go fuck yourself. Like, I'm not going to go over there and watch you sell Panther tickets, for basically nothing. But to me, it was something that was fascinating because it was the ability to be able to walk into somewhere, command a presence, and convince someone, even though you had to go through about 80 no's a day. But eventually you were going to get to that one person that you could possibly make a connection with and sell to. So I left that day thinking, oh my God, like I want to be a Panther salesperson, which now that I think about it is just the most ridiculous thing that I could have possibly thought about at the time. But I came back the next day, and then 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 eventually I had to graduate with what was called at the time my day of O, which was my big day. It was your day that you had to go out there and do this thing on your own. And of course, I mean, lo and behold, first day, I bombed, my guy, right? I was a disaster out there. No, I mean, I sucked. I couldn't smile right. I couldn't get the pitch down. I mean, I was absolutely fumbling on my words. It was just abysmal, right? Abysmal. But little by little, I began to realize and become a chameleon in different types of situations. And I got my first sale. And then I got 2 sales, and then 3 sales, and then 5, and then 10. And the goal was always to do 10 a day. But then I started getting really good, like really good, because I became obsessed with the psychology behind a sale. And that really was the spawn of what ultimately has gotten me to the point right now. I went from having no sales experience to having the most craziest school of hard knocks on how to actually sell to someone, because usually people go to sales school or they read a sales book or whatever, but there's nothing like walking into a room knowing that you are a solicitor, right? Because you see the signs everywhere, no soliciting, right? Knowing that you are a solicitor, walking into this particular office or wherever the hell they were, and convincing someone of something that you want them to buy, right? That I credit that to this day. I use these tools that I learned on how to speak to people, on how to cater to someone. I would learn things I remember on an everyday basis that this lady would teach me, and she would be like, the most important thing that you can always do is read someone's name tag, because you're going to catch them off guard. Right? So even right now, if I get out of a valet and I walk out, I read their name tag inconspicuously, and then I repeat their name to them because I know that it's going to catch them off guard. So I would get off and I'd be like, oh, his name's Roger. I come out, hey, Roger, what's up, man? How are you doing? And I shake their hand, look them in the eye, and give them a smile. And I knew that would break people's barriers down, and that's how I was able to sell. So if I walked in and someone had their name on their office, they would be sitting down. Let's say the reception name was Angie something. I'd walk in there, hey, Ange, how you doing? So I wouldn't even say their name. I would say their nickname, right? I would memorize people's names because I knew that was going to take down their barrier, right? Their immediate no, go fuck yourself, get out of here before I call security. And they would just, at the very least, hear me out, even if it was for 10, 15 seconds. I also learned, more importantly, how to say or how to accept someone saying no to me. And I think that was the biggest one, because that later on helped me on in so many things that I did constantly. I learned how to take rejection right in the chin. And there's nothing more humbling than someone, you could be on the phone or whatever, and someone says, oh, no, I'm not interested, and it hangs up the phone. And that's one thing, right? But there's another thing, you walking into somewhere and someone telling you no on the spot, right? I feel like that is a harder rejection to swallow. At least for me, it was, maybe it's not for some people, et cetera. But for me, I felt that it taught me how to take a no and to keep moving forward, because ultimately all this was a numbers game. I had to talk to enough people to where eventually I would get one middle-aged woman or maybe an owner who had some kids that the situation matched up correctly, and I was able to sell them some crappy Panther tickets for them to sit in the mezzanine level for $30, and they would get 5 or 10 or whatever the hell the tickets was. I can't remember that, but that was my first introduction to sales, right? Once I did that, I realized after a year that, I wasn't going to get to the situation I was in. So I had already failed in school. I went to school for a year, realized that it was just absolute trash, got into insane debt because of it, quit, started that job. And then eventually I realized that, okay, cool. Now I have this skill. What can I possibly do with it? Right. So, a couple years went by, and I won't go through all that crap because it's really nothing really major happened. But right about the time that I hit 27 or something like that, I realized I was at a pivotal point in my life where I was searching for something that I just wasn't finding in my cushy job. I was working at the time at a place called T-Mobile. It's everybody knows what T-Mobile is. They've been bought out by Sprint. I don't really know how that goes, but I was working at T-Mobile, just being a regular pedestrian life. But in the back of my mind, I knew I always wanted to own a business. And I was working at T-Mobile, just kind of doing my everyday kind of thing. And one of my boys, I remember where I was. I went to Oleta Park, which, if you're familiar with Miami area, it's a park out in North Miami. And we went and we rented kayaks, and we went out there, and we went out to like this island. It was just me and him. We grabbed a couple beers, and we're like, oh, let's slam some beers and like let's talk some shit out there. And he told me that he had a friend of his whose wife at the time, brother, so a friend's wife's brother, lived in Nepal and started a music school. And so he went and he told me, hey, bro, like, I think that you should definitely come with me because I'm going to go visit him in Nepal. And I had this, T-Mobile job that was paying okay. I really didn't have anything going for me. I'm an uneducated or non-college educated Latino male. Didn't really have much going for me. I was 25 years old. And at the time, I was thinking to myself, like, bro, like, nah, like, I want to, stay in Miami, and I want to do this, I want to build a business and all this, but I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And I was slowly convinced, little by little, for my boy after that conversation, to just get up and go. But I know that I didn't want to just leave for, 2 weeks that he had planned. I knew that I wanted to stay out there for a while. So for the next 2 to 3 weeks, essentially what I did was have this crazy internal battle with myself on what it was that I wanted to do. And did I want to go out there in Nepal? What did I have going with me? It was like putting things on a scale. At one point, I had my parents who, worked their asses off to, get me to where I was. I'm living in this country that has all these endless opportunities. I speak the language fluently. I speak English and Spanish. I could be doing so much with my time and my effort and, all these sacrifices that they made. Like, what am I doing with that? Right. And then the other part of me was like, bro, you're still young and you have all this time ahead of you. At 25, I'm thinking like, oh my God, at this point, I thought I was going to have a corner office as a lawyer, sitting somewhere in some, big building in Brickell. And what I'm doing is slanging cell phones for $40, a prepaid plan, So I don't have anything going for me. And I sat there and I thought, man, like, if I could just go on this trip and really just discover who I am as a person and find myself as stupid and as cliche and as Instagram and YouTube cliche as that sounds, it was a pivotal moment in my life where I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. So I remember sitting there at the time and thinking, okay, what the hell do I have to lose? So prior to that, I had, AT&T, and anyone can Google this, T-Mobile was going to merge with AT&T. So they gave a bunch of stocks to the employees that had been there for a long time. And I got like $3,000 or $4,000. I grabbed all my money and I dumped it into an IPO at the time that was called GoPro. And I said, you know what, man, if this shit hits, like, I'm going to grab all this money and I'm going to get the hell out of here. And so I did. I grabbed the money that they gave me on that bonus. I sold my car. I dumped all of it in GoPro. And within 12 months, I almost quadrupled my money. And I said, the hell with this. I booked a ticket with my boy and we left to Nepal. And I said, the hell with it. And I started an Instagram which you guys can Google right now. We'll put it up on the Instagram. It's called 90 Days in Asia because God, it's such a terrible Instagram. My thought process was, okay, I'm going to go to Asia. I'm going to do Nepal for 2 weeks, but then I'm going to keep traveling. And those 90 days, what they turned into eventually was 18 months of me traveling. And it was the best 18 months of my life by far, because not only did I have a freedom that I don't think would have probably ever had in any part of my life, but it was a freedom for me to not only discover who the hell I was by putting me in very adverse situations, but I think at the same time, it gave me this sense of, a lot of people grow up in areas and they say that like you live your whole entire life within a 10-mile radius of where you're from. So wherever you grow up, you're pretty much going to go to most people do. And so you think that ultimately life is like that, right? You think that like the bigger problems that are going to be in your life are, your friends talking trash, or like your boyfriend that does this, or your girlfriend that does that, or whatever the case may be. Is you realize very, very quickly when you travel that the world is bigger than Hialeah, Florida, right? And for the people, like I said, I keep saying the people that are down here from Miami, Hialeah is this real Cuban populated part of Western Miami. And, it's very easy to get consumed in the everyday life of Hialeah or just your friends here. And ultimately you think that like, this is it, right? This is life. Life is just my everyday trajectory of going to work, coming back home, and nuking my supper, to reference a Mark Wahlberg line off of a movie. Basically, it's very just kind of remedial, right? And you think that these problems that you face on an everyday basis are important, but you realize that like life is much, much bigger than that. Life is much more complex, and you are just a small little itty bitty piece of shit living in some crib in Hialeah, and I'm really nothing, right? I started visiting these countries, and I would meet cool ass people that were traveling in Indonesia and Bali, and I went to Thailand, and I went to Cambodia and Laos, and in Cambodia I saw some just super dark stuff. Sorry, I saw some really, really dark stuff from like the genocide that had happened out there, and I saw real poverty, like just insane stuff that I think a lot of people, especially in the U.S., need to be privy of, because ultimately what we do is we live in this bubble, right? We think that the world revolves around the U.S., and not to get too political about it, it's more so like a philosophy of life. Like, I didn't realize any of these things were happening at the same time that I'm, struggling with, I don't know, an activations that month. I'm over here thinking that that's, really rough because I can't meet my quota at my T-Mobile job. And the reality is that people are out there really actually struggling on the other side of the world and going through some real harsh shit, And so for me to realize that, it was very, very hard on my psyche. And for months, I was having a great time, but then I would go to sleep and I'd be like, man, like I am insanely lucky with what I have going on, right? I am taking my life 1,000% for granted, right? These opportunities that my parents went to, because I ended up living in Australia and I know the language in Australia, but yet as an immigrant American who went to Australia to live there, because they had this visa to where it was called the work holiday visa. And if you were under the age of 30, you could live in Australia for a year as an American and pay taxes and have a regular job. And you can go, you were just basically a citizen for a year, but you had to go after a year, right? But they wanted people to come work from the US, and they have it with other countries as well, where you could just live there. So I lived there for 8 months. And even in Australia, I lived and worked through a lot of the struggles of an immigrant living in a different country. So I sat there and thought to myself, man, like if I'm going through this, I speak the language, I came with a little bit of money from traveling. Like imagine what my mom and what my dad did to get here. They got here. My dad, full disclosure, my dad had to come here and marry his best friend's wife for papers because he couldn't get here. And he didn't have the opportunity that I have now, in Colombia. He didn't go through that. So he had to come down to Miami, risk everything, give up his entire family. He's the oldest brother of 10 brothers and sisters, and he's the oldest one. So he has to provide to all of them. He had to say, you know what? I'm going to be, in a way, selfish to give myself an opportunity to live here in the States. My mother is the youngest of 4 brothers and sisters, and she came over here, again, not having nothing to her name. I think my dad tells me this story all the time where he had like $5 or $7 to his name, and they came all the way over here to a country where they didn't know the language. My mom's been here 40 years and her English is, it's chopped up at best, and I always make fun of her, God bless her soul, but love her to death. But like, again, you're coming to a country where you don't know anyone, you don't have any friends, and you're doing it. You find another person, which is, my mother and my father found each other, and they gave each other a chance. They struggled all this insane adversity to have my brother and my sister just so that we can have a chance at this, right? And I started thinking about that stuff, and like I started thinking about all the struggles that they went to just so that I can get a chance to do something with my life. And so I realized very quickly as I was traveling, even before coming back, that like I had to do something, right? I couldn't allow my parents to have all these insane struggles that they did, and for me to just be some, regular dude that just kind of, earns a little bit. And, and it's not even about the money. It was more so like, I wanted my parents to be like, okay, cool. Like I came to this country to give my kids a better shot, and they took advantage of it. Right. So that being the mentality and that being kind of where my mind was at when I was traveling, I came back home and I didn't really know what to do. I came back, I had been traveling for 18 months. I had long hair. I looked like I was a hideous human being. Like I'll put a picture on the board. I don't even want to show this picture, but look at me. I had long hair. I was probably like, to be fair, I was probably like 60 pounds lighter as well. I had this huge beard. A lot of my old friends know what I'm talking about, but I came here and I was just, came back with this hunger and this new vision of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. But I had all this energy. I didn't have really money because you don't really make money when you're in Australia and when you're traveling. So I came back essentially broke, no education, and I came back with just hunger, hunger and appreciation for not only my parents, but I think I came back with a new mentality on how to look at certain situations. I had this job before where I was soliciting, and then I had this corporate job where I was working at T-Mobile, and I just didn't really know where to go from that. So I reached out to one of my friends, and his name is MJ, and he got me a job once again back at T-Mobile because it's the only thing I knew. Right? I didn't have an education. I couldn't just be like, oh, well, I'm a lawyer, so let me just go to another law firm. I'm a doctor. Let me just go to another, medical center. So I got a job again working at T-Mobile. And at this, at this place, I started to look at things on Instagram. And this is really the biggest pivotal point in my life because it's essentially where I change, right? Where everything changes for me. I will remember being in the stock room of T-Mobile, and I remember being in the back room, and I had my phone, and I would just scroll through Instagram. This is very, very early on in the Instagram world. Didn't really know, things were a lot different. The Explorer pages were a lot different. They didn't have reels. Things were very weird, and things were very experimental, I think. And I remember seeing this Instagram, and it was called Cats of Instagram. And that Instagram still exists, I think, to this day. I'm pretty sure. I don't really know if it does or not, but we'll try to see if we can find it for you. But at the time, all they would do was show pictures of cats on Instagram. That's it. That was the big thing, right? And I had this huge beard at the time, and I had like this long hair. And so I said, you know what, man? I'm going to create an Instagram that's called Gnarly Beards of Instagram. And that was it. And so I remember being in the stock room, I remember sitting there and creating the Instagram name. And I grabbed, of course, I didn't have any content. I didn't have anything. I didn't even know what content was, bro. I was lost. And I created this Instagram account and I reposted things that I was able to find on Instagram, on Google. And I just Googled up a bunch of beards. And I was like, you know what, man? Like, this is just going to be funny. I'm just going to make like this account. And I created this Instagram account. It was called Gnarly Beards of Instagram. I posted 3 pictures. And because of the hashtags that I got instantly back in the day, if you posted the right content or posted the right hashtags, you would get like just random people just to like your picture. And the first 3 pictures that I ever got, I got like 4 or 5 likes on them. And I remember that essentially changed my life because I began to become obsessive over creating and building this Instagram, Gnarly Beard of Instagram. And so the story goes that, that week I remember posting, I didn't even post a picture of myself. I would look up at the hashtag beard, because the only thing I could think of to create content, and I would find what was the wildest beard of a guy that I could find, right? So sometimes, who knows what it was, but it was just usually people would, hashtags were a lot more important back then, but they would post like, okay, beard, right? And then so they would have this huge beard. And I remember at the time I used to look up the hashtag. I used to like every single picture on beard. And I would find the beard that I found the biggest. And I would repost them and I would call it Gnarly Beard of the Day. And this Instagram doesn't exist anymore because it got banned many, many years ago. I don't even know why. I think it was because at the time I was using automation tools to try to like make it bigger. But at the time I created it, and it was my first time that I created something that was mine and that I had a following behind it, right? It was something that people were like interested in. And then days and months and time went by, and this Gnarly Beard of the Day became like this kind of, I wouldn't say an internet phenomenon because it certainly was not. Let me just bring my feet down to earth, right? It was a time where Gnarly Beard, it was something that at the very least, someone or multiple people were posting pictures and selfies of themselves. And they would say, hey, is this Gnarly Beard of the Day quality? And I would never reveal my face. It was just, I would just post this gnarly beard and then I would do like a beard a day and then this gnarly beard. And people would wait for this Gnarly Beard of the Day because they wanted to be featured on the page. And I got the page up all the way up to 50,000 followers. I think it was something like that, which at the time was huge. I didn't do it with any shout outs. I didn't do it with influencers. The thought of an influencer wasn't even like, it didn't even exist. It was just something that people who had beards would gravitate to and had a platform where they would submit these things to. And it got really, really big. But what it taught me, and more importantly of what it taught me, was how to effectively sell and grow something on social media. So how it abruptly ended, and this is one of the biggest lessons of my life, I think, to this day, is I got down to about 35,000 followers, which again, at the time, you have to understand, this is a lot of followers. At least for me, it was. Maybe I'm sure there were much bigger accounts, but to me, it was something that was very, very big. And so I said, okay, how do I monetize this, right? I'm working at T-Mobile. Again, I'm trying to find something that I could possibly do where I can own the business. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to sell T-shirts. How the hell do I sell T-shirts? So I paid this guy who I found on Instagram, again, to create 3 logos for me, right? It was just 3 regular logos, nothing crazy. It was my logo. It was like another couple of things that I came up with. And I said, I'm going to come up with a couple of shirts. And that was it. I said, I'm going to make 3 shirts and I'm going to sell them out because I have 35,000 followers. Look how much of an idiot I was. I have 35,000 followers. And even if I get 10% of them, right, which was 3,500. Even if I get 1% of them, that's 350 shirts. I'm going to make it happen, and I'm going to sell out on all these shirts. And so I went to my dad, and I asked him for a $10,000 loan. And I asked my mom and my parents, again, they're not, wealthy parents, so to $10,000 is something that's a lot. But what my dad told me was like, hey, man, if you really think that this is happening for you, I'm going to take out money out of my 401k and I'm going to lend you these $10,000 so that you could buy shirts so that you can sell them. Because that was my plan. I wanted to make a shirt out of it. I figured if only, 1% of them buy all these shirts, then I am going to, sell shirts and I'm going to be a fashion brand owner of a beard company, right? That was it. And then eventually I was going to get into oils and all this other crap. But for what I was going to start, I was going to pull $10,000. So my dad, again, not having it, takes out this money and he gives it to me in a check. And I deposit it in my very first bank account that I opened up from Bank of America. And I put this $10,000 in there and I dumped about $8,000 of it. Truth be told, my dad doesn't know this till this day. I spent about $2,000 like a jerk off at the club, absolutely not being a good entrepreneur. Again, I was young and I was an idiot, right? But like spent $2,000 of it stupidly. And then the other $8,000, I dumped it all in these shirt designs. And I printed these 400 shirts or 300 shirts. And I said, all right, here comes my big debut. I got, at the time I had like almost 40,000 followers and like, I'm going to make all this hype and I'm going to be fucking, I don't know, the next Pharrell of like shirt making or whatever, And I do it and the release comes around and I got my homegirl who had a bunch of tattoos and I was like, I'm going to take pictures of you and like all this craziness that I thought was going to be awesome and that I was going to do this. And I had all this inventory stacked up in my room and I had them folded and I was like, oh, well, I'm going to sell out and I'm going to handwrite all these letters to everyone. And at the time, there was this website called Big Cartel. I don't even know if it exists or not, but I put all the shirts on there, all the pictures. And here comes my big ass debut. And I said, these shirts are going to be released at 12 p.m. on a certain day. And I thought I was going to be like the sneakers app. You know what I mean? People were going to be bidding to like try to find, chomping at the teeth to try to get these shirts. And I remember going to Publix and I was like, I don't even want to look at the numbers because I'm gonna, my head's gonna get too big. I'm gonna sell too many of them. So I went to Publix, which is like a grocery store. I'm just gonna buy groceries and like I'll just see the notifications come in and like I'm Elon Musk of of shirt designs, right? And I remember going to thing, and then it was 12 o'clock. Clock strikes 12. This thing is live. I put the post up, and I shut my phone off. And I go and I do my shopping. I go around. I was like, I don't even want to look at my phone. Like this is gonna be crazy. And I go to checkout, and I look at the shirts. And of the 400 shirts or 450 shirts that I printed, I sold 7 shirts. 7 shirts. So. And I was selling them like $30. So like I made like $210 of a $10,000 loan that I had to pay my dad, who took this money out and paid 33% of his 401k on taxes because he wasn't 65. And I now have to pay $10,000 back. And what I have is $210. That's literally what I have. So needless to say, it was an apocalypse of a business plan and a disaster of an execution, right? I absolutely oversold it. It was horrifying. And now with what face am I going to tell my dad that I'm not going to be able to pay him back? And I still have those shirts. If anybody wants them and listens to this podcast, shoot me a DM. It'll be just pay the shipping. I'm pretty sure they're still in the back of my dad's house, my parents' house, sitting in boxes for over more than 10 years old, these shirts. But what it taught me was, number one, how to fail at a business. Number 2, how to take on debt. Number 3, how to spend it. And number 4, and the biggest one was how to grow an Instagram, but how to realize that what Instagram means, all these followers and all this shit, doesn't translate into actual sales, right? That's what I thought. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I have 35,000 people that follow me. That doesn't mean shit, right? What really means something is you having an effective marketing plan that's going to get you there. And that school of me selling these shirts that failed horrendously taught me more than anything I could have ever learned going to school. At least in my opinion, right? I learned real world what it was like to have a dream and to absolutely fail at that dream, right? And so I owed my dad all this money. I had, I really got dismotivated from this Instagram account that I would dedicate so much time with, because I figured like all these people are just following me, but they're not actually spending money with me. So it was a real like rude awakening and a real discouraging time in my life, because now I was in debt. I had failed at a business horrendously, even though it wasn't even like considered a business, but whatever. I thought to me, I thought I was, this Bill Gates kind of guy, you know what I'm saying? And I had failed. So I had to essentially go back to the drawing board, and I had to try to pay my parents back. And so again, I was still continuing to work at T-Mobile, and I essentially got, sick of working there. And I started getting this job, which is, I've heard it, you guys have heard it before. I got this job at a Fortune 500 company. It's a credit card company. You guys have heard of it, I'm sure, called American Express. And I got this American Express job thinking that it was a better opportunity for me because I had failed as a business owner, and all these things that I was doing were obviously not working. My Instagram skills were still there, but I really wasn't able to translate that into monetary gains. So I said, all right, well, I still have to pay the bills. I'm still living in Miami. I still like to party. I still want to go out and have beer money. What can I do? So I said, okay, let's get a better job. So I started working at American Express, and through a mutual friend, one to the other, I met one of my best friends out there. His name is Carlos. He's the guy actually editing this video right now. You'll hear us call him Creepy. Creepy is his nickname, because when we first met him, he had a Instagram account called the Creepy Camera Guy. Or actually, I think we were talking about it or something like that. And we're like, you should really get up, because he used to do these shots where he was kind of like far away or like from a distance. And we're like, man, you got to get in there. You got to get creepy. And so we called him the Creepy Camera Guy. And he opened up an Instagram account called the Creepy Camera Guy. So now we call him Creepy. And I met him through one of my friends, episode 1 podcast through Mello, and they worked together, and we kind of clicked, and it was, kind of like friendship from the very beginning. And at the time, again, I was working at American Express, and my good friend was working as a DJ, or he was starting to become a DJ. If you guys heard the podcast from before, we'll link it down below so you guys can hear that podcast too on how he became a DJ. But at the time, he was started to become a DJ. I was working at this, this cushy kind of American Express job where I was kind of making money, but there was nothing to scratch that creative itch, right? And so meeting my good friend Creep, we started doing, he was a videographer. Well, he wasn't a videographer. That's me putting it very nicely. He just had a camera, and he would just shoot things, and we would go to the gigs. My boy, who was a DJ, or an aspiring DJ at the time, and he would just shoot pictures of him and videos and stuff like that. And I said, you know what, man, I'm going to buy a camera, and I'm going to do this with you, right? And so him and I began to shoot videos together, and I got, little by little, my itch to scratch my creative side of my brain through camera. And I actually went full dive into videography work. And so little by little, as the months would go by and as the years even went by, we started shooting more and more together. And I created my second business, which we called CNG Media. And CNG Media stood for Carlos and Gus Media. And at the time, it was something where it was cool, and we were the guys that would show up to the clubs with the cameras and take pictures of the hot girls and the videos. And it was something that him and I would do together. And so we would bond over it. But ultimately, it was something that I, once again, found an opportunity to maybe build another business around. And so CNG Media was born under my dream and his dream of becoming professional videographers here in the city of Miami. And we thought we were going to have all these gigs, and we were going to do all this good stuff together, right? As the months and as the time progressed and we got bigger and bigger and bigger, we actually had a lot of success, believe it or not. I was still working at American Express in a very, very corporate style structure job. And I was essentially working both things, and everything was kind of working out in the trajectory of me finally being able to cut the corporate ties and become this successful business owner of what I thought it was going to be. because we were getting more and more and more clients. We were getting clients in the Grove, which is an area here in Miami. We were getting corporate clients, and all of this was due to our videography skills. You know, we prided ourselves in doing this video, and we were kicking ass, and we were doing all this stuff. And little by little, you know, with full disclosure of my good friend who's sitting right in front of me, he got married, you know, and he had a daughter on his way. So he wasn't able to take risks like I was on a business venture. It was no longer, you know, something, you know, keep in mind where we started off was in the clubs. And that's kind of where I got our foot in our door, because at the time we had this friend who was becoming a DJ. So we were able to quickly pick up clients doing club videos. So those nights where he would regularly come with me to go shoot a video at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning were no longer possible because he had a wife and he had his daughter that was coming out on the way. So I remember at the time feeling like a bit distanced from where the dream was once again. And then that same feeling that I got when I lost my old man's $10,000 happened very abruptly, where we were having some sort of success, but we had that conversation with him where he just flat out told me that he just couldn't continue on with the dream that him and I had. And he had to take on more serious and more safer ways of doing his life, rather than going out every single night on a Saturday to go, you know, shoot some girls shaking their ass at the club. You know what I mean? Like, and I at the time, I remember selfishly saying like, damn, like, you know, he betrayed us. He betrayed me. Like, he wasn't going to be there. But the reality was that if I wanted to maintain the friendship, which is ultimately my goal, I had to understand that that wasn't his dream anymore and that it was just mine. And I remember eating that pill that day, and I remember that conversation, and we said, hey, you know what? We're going to split all the gear and we're going to do all this. But I remember specifically thinking, God damn it, dude, like, here we go again. You know, here's this other business that I once again tried to do, but that I failed ultimately once again because I knew that I couldn't do it by myself. He was a much more advanced camera person than I was. He could edit much faster than I was. And he had a vision that I just simply did not have. I was more of like, I'll deal with the clients and then I'll just kind of fudge my way in there. Like, I know what I'm doing, which to a certain extent I did, but he was just much more talented than I was. And so I knew that he was really the reason we were getting the gigs. I was just kind of making the connection and holding that connection to ultimately make a book of clients. So, you know, I begrudgingly said, you know what, I'm going to just do this myself. And maybe 2 to 3 months later, 3-4 months later of me trying to wing it myself and me realizing that I wasn't like a really good camera guy, essentially, I realized that I had to give it up, and I had all this equipment and I had all these dreams and aspirations, yet I still had this corporate job, and the corporate job was paying me more and I got less and less gigs. And so it's the slowly but heart-wrenching reality of me failing again at a business, Now, what did it teach me? And that's kind of where I sat back and thought about it, just like, my first business venture taught me. What did it teach me? Where did I get to? What did I learn ultimately? And I think what it learned me was just one specific skill, which was camera work. And I was able to combine that camera work specifically with a lot of the things that we would do on a daily basis. Like we also taught ourselves how to build websites. We taught ourselves how to create content for other people that we had no idea who they were, because that was kind of our gigs as well. We would do camera work, and then we would also do social media marketing for other people who didn't necessarily have, the wherewithal to take pictures of their food if they were a restaurant, et cetera, et cetera. So it gave me that skill too. But it also taught me on how to break away from a partnership from a friend and keep that relationship and keep that friendship. And it also, I think more importantly, taught me how to ultimately, create something that you have a dream with. And if that person or that life happens, it's okay to pull away and to say, you know what, man, this isn't working. Let's move on different paths. And I think that that took me years to mature, and my vulnerabilities out there of being this guy who's this winner, and like I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna become the next Bill Gates and all this other crazy shit, and realize that this entrepreneur life or this business owner life is hard, and a lot of people don't make it because it is truly something that you not only have to dedicate your life to, but it's something that you have to be ready to fail. And after the second failure is really where I started realizing, okay, Gus, maybe your life is about this corporate. Maybe you do need to be in, maybe your calling isn't to be a business owner. Maybe your calling is to be in the American Express world and to answer phones and to send emails and to be corporate and to do all this stuff. So once I failed at this corporate stuff or the business owner stuff, I dug deep. I went through some really dark months in my life, and I remember them specifically because I sat there and said, okay, I'm not a corporate guy. I'm not at all. I like to curse, and I don't like sending emails, and I don't really like going up a corporate structure. I don't like anyone telling me what to do, and I know that that's, a lot of things that I speak to other business owners, and that's kind of one of the bigger ones. I don't like to say anyone's my boss. Like I hate the phrase, I have to do this for my boss, or my boss this, or my boss. I never use that verbiage because I don't like to say that someone is the boss of me. It's just this weird thing that I have. But at the time, I had no other choice. I had failed 2 businesses. I sucked apparently at becoming an entrepreneur. Like, let's be serious. And I had this job that was paying me over $90,000 a year, and in sales, I was really good at it, but it wasn't fulfilling my true spirit. Like, it wasn't anything that was like, it was good for me. It was good for Gus. And that really killed me, man. Like, it was something that I struggled with all the fucking time. I had to sit there and put on a face and do all this corporate stuff. And I talked to my supervisor and said, hey, I want to move up in the corporate ladder. I remember after I had that conversation, I sat down and I damn near almost cried. And I'm not a crier, dude. Like, I am, like, people who know me know that I don't show emotion like that because my dad was like that, So for a man to show emotion, which is so fucked up, to be honest with you, because you should be able to show your emotions, but it's just the way it is. Like, my old man is an OG kind of guy, and I never saw him cry until his mom, my grandmother, was going through a really, really tough time health-wise, and I saw him shed a tear, and I was already like 16, 17. So imagine, like, to me, something like that is men shouldn't cry is the way I was always taught. Now, of course, I know that nowadays that's just simply not true, but the reality was, at the time, I remember sitting there after I asked to move up in that corporate structure, I almost like broke down in tears sitting in my cubicle because I said, man, dude, like, everything that I've always wanted to be, everything that I worked so hard for, I failed at it, bro. And I sucked at it. And it wasn't even like I was good. I was trash. You know what I mean? And everyone told me I was going to fail, and I did fail. So guess what? Maybe this corporate life is for me. Maybe this is what I am really doing. But the sad reality of that image of me sitting in some sort of office would depress me, and I had to go and live with those demons for months as I was trying to move up in the corporate structure. And so I remember specifically a day where I was sitting down, I was looking at something on the internet, and I saw an advertisement for a Cuban Link chain, right? And this Cuban Link chain was something that I never was a flashy dude, right? The only thing that I used to like was watches. I always used to like watches. My dad bought me a Casio G-Shock, and it was the watch that I loved, and I loved his watch. My grandfather had a watch with a moon phase, and I would always tell him that whenever he passed away, the one thing that I wanted from my grandfather was his moon phase watch. I used to love that watch. I don't even know what brand it was at the time. I'm sure it wasn't anything expensive, but I know that it had a moon dial on it. I loved it. So I loved watches, but I was never a flashy kind of guy. I'm not even a flashy guy now, really, to be honest with you. But I realized that, at the time, I was like, oh, you know what, man? I want a gold chain, right? Like, I want something. I want anything that's, something, a Cuban Link chain. And so I saw this advertisement on this Cuban Link chain, And I went there and started looking for anyone that could sell me a Cuban Link chain. And at the time, I didn't think YouTube or anything like that. It really didn't exist for people that had a platform on YouTube talking about Cuban Link chains like I do now. So I was looking around and I was like, okay, well, let me look up how much a Cuban Link chain is, right? And I remember being very, very surprised at how much a Cuban Link chain actually was worth, and jewelry and gold chains in general. And so I was like, oh, dude, there's no way I'm going to spend $5,000-$6,000 on a gold chain. Like, I need to know that I absolutely love this thing. So what the hell was my plan? Like, I have no, like, I was making good money. I could afford a chain or a gold chain or whatever, but I didn't really know where to get one. And I didn't know if I really wanted one. So I went down to this, my people from Miami are going to know where I'm going to talk about. It's called La 20, which is essentially on 20th and 20th. And it's pretty much a street where all they do is just sell crazy merchandise. And let me explain to you, let me paint this picture so you guys can really understand. It's maybe 7 or 8 blocks. And it's nothing but like stores that wholesale, but they don't wholesale regular shit, right? They like, one of the stores is called Balsan, which if you're from Miami, you understand. Like, this Balsan is just like, it sells like baby clothes and like just the most randomest crap you can ever possibly think of. They sell like fake jewelry is sold there a lot. Think of it kind of like a canal street in New York, but it's Cubans and they're in warehouses. Basically, it's kind of like that, right? So anything that you need, like fake, so you want like a Calvin Klein perfume, but you don't really want to buy a Calvin Klein, you just go down there and it'll be like, like Guillermo Klein. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's this super ghetto, like, makeup shit, right? And so I knew that they sold like fake chains there. So I went down there, I pulled up in my car like a loser, and I picked up this chain. And it was like, I don't know, $20 for the stainless steel crap. And I put it on and I was like, oh, damn. I remember looking myself in the mirror in my car. And I thought I looked like the Latino Denzel Washington. You know what I'm saying? Like, I thought I looked kooky as all hell, And I didn't, I look like a stupid idiot with a stainless steel fake chain on, and whatever. That's the look I saw, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like, if I'm gonna wear this chain, and if I still want it after 2 weeks, I'm gonna buy a real one. Screw it. And so of course I wore this chain. My neck was totally green, like the fading stopped. I knew that it was bad because I would put this thing on, and after the 2 weeks, I would start scratching my neck because, of course, this is stainless steel and copper on you. Like, it's not supposed to be on you, and I'm scratching my neck. So I went there and I got another one. Okay, and then I said, okay, cool. After this 2 weeks, now it's a month. Like, now for sure I'm gonna buy one. Fast forward 2 weeks later, I loved it. All I wanted to do, all I could think about was Cuban Link chains. So I jumped on YouTube. I couldn't find anything really at the time, So I went on there and I saw on Instagram, because of course, Instagram marketing starts, some people think they listen to your phones, but they started putting ads on Instagram. And I saw this ad for this company, and I clicked on it, and the Instagram was like, a Cuban Link chain. I clicked on it. I went to their website. And the website was just so sketchy, dude. So, I mean, this thing looked like, backpages.com, like rubmaps. You know what I'm saying? Like, this was just absolutely just the crappiest website. And I sat there and I looked at it, but the prices that were on the website were better than anybody else's. And I was like, oh, dude, this is too good to be true. I mean, this is crap, right? So I was working at American Express. I was working specifically at the chargeback department. And so I said, you know what, bro? Like, this is so stupid what I'm going to do. I'm going to take out my American Express. Worst case scenario, I'll just report it as fraud. If I don't ever get it, I'm just going to do it. And that's going to be it, right? I'm just going to buy this because, it's the cheapest I can find. I'm going to buy it, put it on my card. Screw it. Let's do this. So I did it. And I bought it. And I bought from this shady ass website. And as I was driving home from American Express, I would get out usually around 10. And I was driving home and I get a phone call. And I'm like, oh, what's up? And then I'm like, hello. Like, it's a phone call from a local number. And I get a phone call, and he says, hey, my name is blah, blah, blah. This is something from Gold Fever Miami, which is how I started, which is how I got introduced. And I said, yo, yeah, man, what's up? And he was like, yeah, man, I just want to call you and let you know we appreciate your order. And want to let you know that it takes about 2 weeks and we'll get you your order out. And I looked at him and I was like, bro, I didn't even think you were real, fool. Like, I didn't even think, like, who even is this? Number one, are you legit? Number two, and number three, your website, if you are legit, looks like you know when you get the templates on like Wish, like on Wish.com of like, I will build the website for you for $5. Like that's what it was. Abysmal of a website. So I let him know that straight up, and we just probably cracked up together for about maybe 10 minutes of just laughing. And he was like, listen, man, I am not a web page builder. I know, I slang these chains. And ultimately, like, I'm legit as hell, but, if you want, after maybe an hour conversation, he tells me, yo, if you want, I can show you the chain. Where is it that you live? Because we had gotten like pretty comfortable with each other. And I was like, well, I live in Hialeah. He's like, what street do you live on? I told him the street. And he goes, no way, dude. I live, let's just say as an example, it was 5th Street. And he's like, I live on 8th Street. And I was like, what? So he's like, yeah, I live in East Hialeah, just like you do. And and we sat there and I was like, so if you live on East Hialeah, where is your house specifically? He goes, yo, it's right here. And I said, no way, dude. You literally live 2.5 blocks away from me. And I was like, how long have you been there? And he's like, my whole life. And I'm like, motherfucker, I've lived here my whole life, So it was this instant bonding moment that we had where we literally lived within, a 30, if it's more than a quarter mile, it'd be too much. It's 2.5 blocks away from each other our entire lives. And here we are, we met up through this ad or through the website that I happened to discover. So he came over. And we chopped it up and we talked so much and we laughed and we had such a good time. And I let him know, hey, listen, man, I have this business that I had, which is where we would market. You what you don't know how to do, right? And that is take pictures very well, because your website literally looks like Al Qaeda built it, right? It is horrible and shady and dodgy at best. So if you help me, by giving me this thing at a discounted price or whatever, I can help you. I'll go down there and I'll take some pictures of you making chains and the whole 9 yards, right? And so that was how my jewelry world, or my foot into the jewelry, that was my first day as an official jeweler. And the way it worked out was I went over to the shop at the time. We had they had some guys working on chains, and I remember swinging the door open. I had my tripod, I had my lights, I had my crazy camera rig with like 2 cameras, and I was walking in there, ready to shoot up a storm like it was a reality show. You know what I'm saying? I walked in there and all I see is a bunch of shirtless guys in a room that was maybe 400 square feet. It was hot as hell. And they were like filing chains and like soldering chains. And the guy looked at me like, who the hell are you? You know what I'm saying? Like he had been hiding under a bridge like a troll for the past 30 years. It was this crazy look. And he's like, who the hell are you? And I was like, what the hell is this, dude? Because I thought in my life, everything was Harry Winston. I thought it was like Van Cleef. Everything was beautiful. And like, people would make, jewelry with gloves. And it was like a Mercedes AMG dealership. You know what I'm saying? And all this crazy shit. And what I walk into looks like, like a sweatshop. Like if I'm in downtown Beijing. You know what I mean? Like it was crazy. So I start taking pictures and I start doing all this stuff. Fast forward 2, 3, 4, 5 days later, I realized that I'm taking pictures. I'm going down there every day. I don't know why. If you ask me right now, why did you help him and why did you get so much out of it? Or like, why did you volunteer so much of your time? I can't think of the reason why. I'm more convinced it was more maybe the relationship and the friendship that we built. But ultimately what ends up happening is I start realizing that after 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, I'm literally taking pictures every day. And I'm running the Instagram account just like I had built 2 Instagram accounts before that. And so all of a sudden, he goes from having a crappy Instagram account, a crappy website, to me rebuilding the website. And the only thing that he could offer me at the time, he didn't have much money, but we sat down and he said, hey, listen, man, after about a month or so, Sales started coming in. Like barely any sales had happened before that, but now sales are coming in. People are interested. People are sending DMs wanting to know prices, etc. We build the website and people are buying off the website, right? And now all of a sudden it starts to become something where one day we get a sale, and then 4 or 5 days later we get a sale, and then maybe a week later we get a sale, etc., etc. But the point is, there's interest and there's actual bubbling of like there's an energy going around us that we're saying, okay, cool, like this could potentially become something. So he couldn't pay any more for my time, and at the time, it's not like I had much, money to have anyway. I was working at American Express. I didn't really need the money from there, and I had already known that I wasn't going to continue on with CNG Media, so I was doing this by myself. And I told him, he told me, hey, I can't offer you anything more, but here's what I can do. I will teach you how to make chains, and I will get you into this jewelry world, and you have to just market me online, because that's what I did, and we have to look legit. So we started a partnership, and that was the birth of my very first jewelry company called Gold Fever Miami. And a lot of people that are following me now know me from then, but that's ultimately how it started. It started from a chain that I purchased from him that I joined all my life experiences from, with growing Instagram accounts and starting camera work. And we fused those two worlds together. And he said, I will teach you this and you will teach me that. And that's how it started. And in the beginning, it was rough. All intents and purposes, let's be real. It was rough. It was not the greatest experience to begin with because we didn't have any money. He had his job, I had my job, and we were just two broke cats from Hialeah, basically had failed at a couple of things, and all we had was a pipe dream. It was like we would sit there and like drink beers in the back of his house and, like think about and dream about how we were going to become these, the next Tiffany and Co., and it was just a dream. We didn't really have it. But that's always what I've had, just dreams. And it wasn't really anything that I could put concrete 2 feet on the ground and say, okay, cool, this is a well-established business. So we started off by selling chains and introducing a market to gold over silver, which a lot of people didn't really know what that was. But we would plate these chains and we would plate them in the back of his house. It was no fancy operation. This wasn't, like some nice warehouse, again, with white gloves. Like this was in the back of a crib in Hialeah, like in a backyard with a pot, and we would just do our best with what we had. But little by little, we started buying machines, right? We would buy a filing machine, and he would teach me, and I would teach him about how to take a picture and et cetera. And it got bigger in the sense of the backyard. And we had a couple of things. And then we were able to hire one employee. And after that one employee, afterwards, we didn't even have money to pay him. We didn't have money to pay for ourselves, much less him. We would pay him $80 a day, and he would work 12 hours. And I felt really bad, but we didn't have any money to pay him outside of that. We weren't making sales enough to pay him like that, So we had to deal with what we had, and that's what we had. We had a couple of tools, and we would just make chains back there, right? And little by little, we got more and more chains, and we were working in the backyard, and we had this whole little operation with a bunch of ghetto-ass tools. And one of the most important things happened to my life where we are talking about potentially renting a space. And as we're talking about potentially renting a space, me as being the conservative, I tell my business partner, hey, let's not actually do this. Let's just stay here for as long as we can, outwork this place, and then we'll get bigger. And just as I told him that, call it divine intervention, call it whatever the hell you want. I don't care. I just call it coincidence at the time. This huge storm rolls in. I kid you not. It was more so the wind gust. And this wind gust starts blowing in, maybe 2 to 3 minutes later, starts blowing in like a movie and blows our entire carp and our tools and just throws everything everywhere. So now there's silver on the floor. There's tools all over the grass. It was like a straight up tornado had happened. And we sat there and we said, you know what? If that's not a goddamn sign, I don't know what is. So the next day, 2 days later, we opened up our shop. And there was the birth of Gold Fever Miami being an actual business in a shopping plaza. And that's how we started. And that's really where I began to think to myself, okay, this is not just a dream. This is now becoming a reality. And I thank him for that because a lot of times I had a lot of self-doubt in my mind. And I didn't really know how to do things with a determination that was unwavering. And a lot of times I had, thoughts of not only self-doubt, but more so I would second guess myself in a lot of situations. And I had to learn from someone else who had a very bullish mentality on how to make those decisions without any fear with anybody who said, but number two, without fear of failure. And I was so insanely scared of failing that I genuinely couldn't have the self-confidence to run the business by myself in the beginning. So we started off with 2 employees, with 1 employee. Then we got a second one. We had this huge 1,500 square foot warehouse, and we started off really like building everything ourselves. Again, we didn't have the profits. We didn't have anything to build it. So we started off slow. We would do the work ourselves. I had to lay sheetrock. I don't know. If you know me, and anybody who's listening to this podcast understand and knows me, I suck at building anything with my hands. I cannot do it. Tell me to make a chain, I'll make a chain for you. But to actually sit there and make something out of nothing, like, there's some people that look at like IKEA furniture and they look at it like, oh, son, I got you, fam. Give me 20 minutes and a screwdriver and this thing will be just up and running, right? That's not me, papa. I suck at it. And I was sitting there doing electrical wiring, like just obviously following someone doing electrical wiring. I wasn't knowing how to do it. I was hanging up drywall. I was putting up like sound padding. I was doing all this stuff that I was forced to do because I just didn't have any other choice. We didn't have the money to pay somebody else to do it. So we had to build this warehouse from scratch. Fast forward, months and months went by and the business started really taking off. I would do these Instagram lives and I would go on Instagram and showcase everything that I had learned, because I would see the other competition out there, which was other people selling jewelry. And I realized that they didn't have what I had, which is I knew how to shoot professionally. And I had professional cameras and I knew what people liked. I knew the ASMR aspect of Instagram. I knew what would grow an Instagram account because I had done it so many times before. So we went from not doing anything to now making hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales per month. And for someone who is, young, for someone who's never seen this kind of money before, for someone who has a business partner that also doesn't know that kind of money, we made so many mistakes, right? We took so many things for granted and we got ourselves in very, very highs and very, very lows because we didn't understand business. You have to see it from a perspective of like, here are these 2 cats, young, who are controlling $1 million business to, 2-3 years before that, we were just sitting in our houses, scratching our balls in our living room. It's a huge learning curve. And it's one that I can genuinely tell you is probably the greatest teacher of anything that I do from now on for the rest of my life. And maybe I'm going to learn a lot more and fail a lot more. But ultimately, the learning curve that I had there was something that is worth to me $1 billion, because from the failures and the ups and downs and the scares and the whole process that I went through, working at that company, it was something that I can't really quantify in a 1.5-hour podcast. It's something where you just had to see it or live it to really understand it. But I learned how to deal with money. I learned how to have money. I learned also how to deal with different types of personalities under my control or under my management. After years went by, I realized that a lot of the connections and a lot of the visions that we both started off with weren't aligning anymore. And, you have a vision as a business owner of one thing, and the other person in a partnership, when you go 50-50 with them, may have a completely different one. And there became one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life, which was, carry on the success of this business that is doing well, that we're cultivating, that we built like a baby. Imagine this project that you put so much time and effort and want and this insatiable desire for success with it, having built it from literally nothing to saying, hey man, like our views don't align anymore, not in a good way or not in a bad way, where, the friendship has to ultimately matter more. And I think I touched on that with my partnership before that. But, do you want to break away from this and do things on your own? Because the way I saw it, and this is just me being vulnerable and truthful and doing all this, is like, I always wanted this to be something that I solely owned, and I wanted it to be look and have a certain aesthetic and have a certain goals and morals and vision and values. And he had a different one that was similar, but in his own way. And my vision and his just weren't aligning anymore. And so I had to make that decision on whether I wanted to start on my own. But how? We had $100,000 in equipment. We had all this book of client of people that trusted in the brand. We had all this social media content out there. How was I going to start on my own? And you know what? And I credit a lot of it for him, because that one skill I think that I needed to just launch it on my own was my determination and my bullish mentality to go through any sort of obstacle and say, okay, you know what? You are the man. You are going to make right decisions. You're going to make some bad ones, but ultimately it's going to lead to something, because now you could do it. It's like learning how to catch a ball. You know what I mean? Most of the time it's just the nerves that you get right before the ball touches your hand, and you get all nervous and you fumble the ball, whatever. But after repetition, you know that you can catch it. So it doesn't matter from where they throw it, you're going to be able to catch that ball. It was the same thing when I launched my business. I started Gus Villa Jewelry with essentially no money, right? I left, I signed over my half of the business. It was the hardest decision to tell him, to tell the employees, to tell everybody that I cared for. We became a family in there. Everybody that I care for, that I was going to leave. Because now I was like, that divorced parent, that was like, hey, listen, I love you guys, but I'm going to go do my own thing. It was essentially like that. It was hard. I had to tell a lot of people a lot of things that, I had to be truthful with myself, because it's something that I wanted to. And I had to be truthful with a lot of people I cared for. And ultimately the decision was, I want to do this on my very own, because I want my company to be a certain vision. And I know that the only way that I can accomplish that is by doing things solely on my own. So I left, I left and I left with no money, really. I had the money that I had made, but it wasn't enough to start like a jewelry business and do everything that I had. I grabbed all my equipment and I left, and I moved locations, and I opened up my own location, and I got, at the time it was like 3 people that I knew how to make chains myself, and 1 employee that was selling. And that's how I started. And that's how I started Gus Villa Jewelry, with really nothing substantial to fall back on. There was the first 3 weeks where I wouldn't pay myself, and I was scrubbing by just to make payroll. This is actually what happened. I'm not sugarcoating it. This is what I keep always saying. This is what really starting a business is all about, whether it be jewelry or whether it be, a nail salon, whether it be a barber shop, whatever the hell it is. This is how you start, right? You have to be okay with being at zero. And I was okay with that. But it's not until you eat so much shit before that you realize that it's not that deep, And I started this not knowing how I was going to pay people. And I would make a sale here from someone that would just walk into the shop. I would make a sale and I would pay all the employees in the beginning. And then I would do another sale and I used to pay everybody. And I wouldn't pay myself, and a month would go by, and in 2 months, and I was, nobody knew who Gus Villa Jewelry is. Everybody knew who my last company was, but no one knew, Gus Villa Jewelry, right? They had no idea. I wasn't on YouTube. There was no reviews about me. I wasn't on Instagram. Everything was zero. I started with nobody. And I don't say that so it'd be like, oh, look how cool you are. What I'm saying is that I say it more so because I was scared shitless. Having all this notoriety online and people knowing you to not having anything is a daunting feeling. And to begin with, when you don't have money and you don't have payroll and you don't have all these things, you have to put your head down and just believe in yourself. Fuck what everybody tells you. Fuck what anybody suggests. I used to talk to people who I dealt with on an everyday basis, and they'd be like, why are you going to leave, man? That's crazy. That's so stupid. Why would you do that? You know what I mean? And it's just because of that feeling that you have to bet on yourself. And the way it grew was post by post on Instagram. That's how I did it. You know, I would post every day and maybe one video. I remember I used to tell my friends, like, I'm posting all this awesome content to get only 5 views. And like, I remember having a post and it would be like, oh, cool. Like you have 17 likes. That was like a big thing for me. You know what I mean? And that's how I started. And I would just continuously be persistent in posting good content. And then you would get these people who believed in you to start buying your chains. And then little by little, that snowball became bigger and bigger. And then in 4 months, I was able to buy more machines. And then in 5 months, I was able to buy a nice office. And we put computers in the office. And now we had employees coming in and out, running, things. And again, in the back of my mind, I'm now thinking, okay, Gus, like you failed at 3 businesses now. And what makes you think that this isn't going to be the same? That self-creep and that self-doubt come into your mind just like it does in any sort of situation that you're in. It's only human nature. And the only thing that kept me afloat ultimately was, number one, I knew I wanted this and I knew I wanted to bet on myself and I knew I wanted to create it. But to go back full circle, and that's the reason I tell that story in the beginning, it's because I'm the son of immigrant parents, right? And they came here to do something special with their lives. Now, whether they feel like they accomplished it or not, I do, because I'm the son of them, right? And I know that the struggles that they went through, and it's the one thing that I could genuinely tell you that motivates me every day. It's why I push so hard to become successful, because I always want to make them know that what they sacrificed was worth it, right? That what they did, all the risks that they put in their lives was actually worth a shit. It's something that they did that they can die, in their deathbeds and say, all right, I did it. It's like that animal, I don't know if it's the octopus or whatever, that once it dies, its body becomes food for its kids so that they can have enough energy to leave the den and go off and be octopuses, right? Or whatever fucking animal it is. It's something that I do that pushes me because I want to ultimately let them know that all their sacrifices, everything that they did was worth it. You know what I mean? So without getting all emotional and all weird about it, that is ultimately how I got to the section or the place where I'm at now. It's your ability to push through any self-doubt and that fear and that everything that tells you not to go and open that door. And if you just push through it, eventually, if you work hard enough and you sacrifice time and you're hard at pushing for a goal, you are going to fucking get there, man. And it's scary, and there's a lot of ups and downs, mostly downs, but ultimately you can get to where you want to be. I grew this company from having nothing to now we do well over anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000 in revenue every single month. And I don't say that to sound like, oh, look how much bread I have, because I don't, because that doesn't mean that's just the gross sales, right? That's a very inflated number. But to tell people that this is like, I'm able to live comfortably now because of it. I don't have a boss. I am the boss, and I do that, but because I have a fucking outstanding team that works their asses off every single day to make me look like the successful person, right? I am insanely lucky to have them, and I'm insanely grateful for them, and mostly I'm grateful for the people listening and the people that support Gus Villa Jewelry. Shout out to my boy Angel Kuano. Sorry, I didn't mean to say your name, but he put out a video that really blew up my Instagram and my business and everything, really, along with all the other efforts that we did. But he has this thing where he says, support the people that support you, right? And I genuinely believe in that. Like, the reason I'm here is because there's so many people that buy my chains, and it's the people that listen to this podcast right now. It's because I'm so lucky to have people that, number one, fuck with me, but number two, like, spend their hard-earned money on anything that I put out. So that's the story of Gus Villajuli. That's the story of me. There's a lot to be told after that, and maybe there's a lot of things that I missed out on, but I wanted to tell the story for you guys to get the gist of it and to understand that you can make it. If there's someone listening to this podcast, there's someone listening to this in a car, at your crib, in a fucking cubicle, and you have a dream of whatever it is that you want to do, man. You are listening to someone that was in the exact same position as you, the exact same position, just a dream and a bunch of failures. And the only reason why I made it, the only reason, and again, I haven't made it, but you know what I mean? The only reason I've had success is because I genuinely did not stop trying. And that's the only message that I want to leave with you guys today, So anyway, man, I know I've rambled off for, an hour and 30 minutes. And if you stuck around this long, man, I appreciate it. I'm going to wrap up this podcast by once again thanking you guys. Thank you for listening to the story. If you guys have any questions about me or anything about Gus Villa Jewelry in general, whatever it is, let me know. And we'll catch you guys in the next podcast. I don't really know how to, a non-awkward way of ending this podcast, but I appreciate it. I love you guys, and we'll see you next time, bro.